Module 4. Try some different ways of tapping. It may be helpful to learn and to try some different tapping points and ways of tapping. There's nothing wrong with the points used in the tapping sequence, but occasionally some people prefer to use additional or different points, or to tap a bit differently. This isn't usually necessary, but on occasion a slightly altered method is helpful for whatever reason. It may be your system, it may just be a temporary thing that needs a one-time fix, or maybe you're stuck on something. Here are some different ways that you can tap. There are quite a few different ways out there that you may have seen or may have been shown if you've experienced tapping before. There was the original recipe from Gary Craig, or maybe you learned TFT from Dr. Roger Callahan. Some techniques included all the face points and the finger points and the 9 gamut. Chances are that you're probably using one of the shortcut methods if you're already tapping. And the shortcut methods are also different from one another. I'm going to explain a few different things that you can use. You might find it helpful to change up the way you tap. For example, if you tap with one hand, maybe it's your habit to just do one side of the body, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you are not getting results and you feel like you would like to try it, you can cross over your body and tap on the opposite side. If you don't always do that, try tapping on the other side. Just switch sides. That's one different way of tapping. There's a reason for it that may affect some people that has to do with energies crossing over your body. So if you aren't getting results, this may be one simple remedy. Or if you're mainly using one hand, try using two hands. It's just switching it up. You may or may not get different results. Another way is to cross over your hands. Some people do need this crossover in their system, and it's not as uncommon as you'd think. You cross your hands and use both hands to tap on the double points. Basically, you keep your arms crossed through the process. It's about crossing over your system. For some people, that seems to help the energy move. And it may not be that you have to use that every single time. It may be that you're just particularly stuck on something, and it may be that one-time fix that you don't need to keep doing. It's worth trying for that thing because it could be the answer to it. Another different way of tapping is, when you're tapping, if you're using two hands, you go back and forth with your hands as they tap. It creates a rhythmic back and forth tapping. It's very calming, and I love tapping like this. It's like normal tapping, but it has a slightly different feel to it. Something else you can try is the touch and breathe technique, which was developed by Dr. John Diopold. In this case, you touch the point, hold it, and take a breath. And then you move on to the next point as you're focused on your reminder phrases, and you take another breath. It's very calming and can be useful for some people who are uncomfortable with the tapping aspect of this technique, but who would still like to get the results and the benefits. There are some other specific points that you may or may not use. You can add them into your regular routine, or you can add them in occasionally, whatever works for you. Not everyone uses the top of the head point. It was a later point that was added. Not everyone uses the wrist points, but I love the wrist points because there's 3 meridians that come down the arm, and you get a chance to tap all of them without having to do your finger points. And there are actually 3 meridians that go up the back of the arm as well, so you could even tap on the back of the wrist. When I work with clients, I tap on the front and the back of the wrist sometimes. You'll definitely hit some points. And then there are the finger points. Not everyone likes using the finger points, but I often use them with clients because they're very non-invasive. But the way I'm going to show you now in the handout is a little different than what you may have learned before. The point on the middle finger is actually at the tip of the finger, and there's a point on the 4th finger. So take a look at the handout so you can see where that is on the hand. Some people love the liver point. The liver point is underneath the breast, directly below the nipple. Some people like that point. I don't use it very much, partly because it's not so easy to get to, especially when I'm working with clients. But if I'm particularly stuck, especially on an anger issue, because the liver does rule anger in Chinese medicine, I may try using that point. It also deals with all emotions in Chinese medicine, so it may be a good point to stimulate. Another thing to consider is the 9 gamut procedure. I don't use the humming and counting portion that was originally taught. You can use a modified or simplified version of the 9 gamut. You tap between the 4th and 5th finger on the 9 gamut point, and you can see it in the picture in the handout. And you do this as you're tuned into the issue or problem. And then you close your eyes, you open them, and then you look down hard to the left, then you look down hard to the right, and then you circle your eyes all the way around, like in a really big circle, and then you do it in the other direction. The original 9-gamut procedure had you hum a tune and then count in order to access both parts of the brain, but I don't find that you necessarily have to do that. But sometimes I'll do the eye movements twice if I'm really stuck. The method itself helps you to access both sides of your brain. After you do it, you continue tapping as normal. That's just another thing you can add in. You can also try tapping lighter or harder. Maybe you're tapping too hard. I've seen that happen many times. I've had clients come in and I watch them tap, and they're just pounding themselves. You don't need to tap that hard. I'm not saying it won't work, because it could work for them, but try tapping more lightly, or try tapping faster or more slowly. Or maybe you do need to tap a little harder because maybe you haven't been tapping hard enough. That's fine too. Just try something different. Finally, the last thing I'll say is that sometimes, and I've actually found this in my practice, when you're saying your setup statement and your reminder phrases, sometimes it helps to say it louder and more emphatically. So if I have someone who comes in and really needs to move an anger issue, and they're clearly not in touch with that anger, sometimes they need to almost start shouting. Maybe somebody comes in and I can see and sense clearly that there's a lot of anger sitting there under the surface, and they start tapping along with me and saying very quietly, "Even though I have all this anger, even though this is really bothering me," they're verbally meek. So in that case, I'll have them shout it. Sometimes they really need to almost yell it in order to access that feeling. This is especially true for someone who has had a message from childhood that you can't speak up, or it's not okay to be angry, or anything like that. Or maybe you're not comfortable with anger. That's not uncommon. This can bring it up for you, particularly if you're a soft-spoken person. Or perhaps someone has had an issue about not being heard and they only feel safe speaking in a little voice. Speaking very loudly and clearly could potentially help move the energy through the body if regular tapping isn't shifting the issue. So these are my recommendations for trying some different ways of tapping.